everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Bikini and the Brain podcast. My name is Ashley Kaltwasser, and beside me here we got Adam Bonilla from TeamElitePhysique.com.
Hello, how you guys doing today?
I hope everyone out there is doing well. We're doing well. We're really excited to be talking today about a certain little thingy.
Yeah.
Little subject.
Yes, we got subjects. We're having some fun. Ashley's having fun. She's eating a little bit of carbos too, working out heavy and hard. Glutes came right back after a few weeks.
Yeah, we got the glutes back. What it wasn't the carbs, and it wasn't really even the training. Honestly, it was just continuously praying to the glute gods.
Yes.
So what it was.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, but in all honesty, guys, it wasn't that, I guess, spectacular of a thing because honestly, it just kind of needed to fill back out, which just briefly we'll kind of describe. Filling out doesn't mean like putting on muscle necessarily. It means like you were kind of depleted and now you're filling up the balloon, I guess.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
Hopefully we come into Denver with some balloon glutes.
Yes, some big old balloon glutes.
Big old balloon glutes. We filled that balloon up.
Yes. Yeah, and I think part of it just shows for people to just see like, hey, when you're doing peak week, you can only work out like, a lot of time people only work out like 3 days during that peak week to try to like reduce inflammation and whatnot. So when you string together, 5 shows in 7 weeks, you're talking in, 7 times that, so 49, in 49 days, which you'd usually work out 42 of them, you're only working out like 5 times, like 20-ish of them, maybe even less. It starts to pay its toll. So yeah.
Yeah,
even
with the food too, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't really experiment with the carbs too much because you can definitely eat your carbs, right? But you don't want to eat enough to where you're spilling over. So we had to be super careful with that too.
I think it just shows to show you too, like, I think the good thing about that is what you've kind of like shown is that you don't need to go crazy after a show. You don't, people are like, no, you need to have a cheat meal. Like you need it. Like you just need it for your mental life. Like you did it for 7 weeks, 5 shows, no cheat meals after the show. That's I think the only thing you have is like a protein bar because you needed to at the airport. Yeah, that's pretty impressive, to be honest. And I think that's another episode we're going to go into too, is like the post-show dieting and how people blow up after a show, and if it's necessary, like how much fat is necessary to gain off season. I think that'd be a good one to do pretty soon. I think we were talking about doing that. So if you guys want to hear that one, let us know in the comment section below. Anyway, but today's episode is everything to do with food, and in a particular way. You go right into it, Ashley.
Yeah, like the controversy surrounding food. So one thing that I've noticed, and I don't know if you ever get this, Adam, but so on my YouTube channel, right, I will post like food content, like, hey, this is my weekly diet, or sometimes I'll post like my weekly workout routine, right? It always seems like I get way more critique with the diet portion of my videos rather than training, right? So in my like nutrition videos, I'll oftentimes get some, I guess, alarmists when it comes to like food and what's in the food and what kind of food I eat. We get some of that, and then we also get like the bros, right? Like the guys that maybe stumbled upon my channel somehow but are from like the bodybuilding side of our industry, and then they'll be like kind of critiquing it from that aspect as well. But I think there's a lot of misconceptions about like food and these little like, I guess, catchphrases when it comes to food. We hear them all the time. Non-GMO, artificial sweetener free. And you hear these phrases and sometimes people automatically think it's a good thing. Some people don't care. But I think a lot of how people perceive food to be healthy or unhealthy sometimes is dictated by like articles they read or something they saw on social media without really looking that far into it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And there's a whole bunch of them, to be honest. When I was looking at the topic a little bit, I was like, man, there's a whole bunch of, I guess you call them alarmists.
Yeah.
Right? It's funny how everything's so regulated by people's opinions these days too, right? Like you have to like cater to people's opinions. It's so funny. But so we're going to go into a couple of them. Some of them are myths, some of them are just, Ashley knows some, I know some that are different. Some are myths, some are true, and I think it's kind of cool to just dive into it, and that way you can, make your own decision for it, do your own research on it. But some of them are really kind of out there, to be honest.
Right.
Like how did this even become a thing?
Yeah.
And so we'll go ahead and jump into. So I think one of the first ones that we commonly hear, I think probably one of the most common ones is that you talked about was microwaving food, and then artificial sweeteners. Those are like the two that I hear about a lot.
I hear by far the most is artificial sweeteners / chemicals.
Yeah.
So those are, I don't hear so much the microwave one. I hear that sometimes, but not as much as the idea of artificial sweeteners causing cancer, making you gain weight, or making you hungrier. So that's like, I think the three biggest things I hear about the sweeteners is like, it causes cancer, or your body doesn't know the difference between real sugar and artificial, so you might as well you do the real sugar. And then of course, anytime you consume artificial sweeteners, it just makes you hungrier than you would have been. So 3 different points to be tackled on artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, so I think the first one, which has been, I mean, here's the thing. When you're doing like these studies, more times than not, almost always, you're doing it on like lab rats. And the problem is that it doesn't always translate to humans. It doesn't translate to humans in a lot of the scenarios, actually, probably in more than less. So when you look, and you also got to look at the quantities that they're doing. So when you look at, there's a couple studies. One was on like aspartame and lab rats, right, or lab mice, and the amount that they were having. So they were like, does it cause cancer, right? And in the mice, they said they had a higher likelihood that they would get cancer. What the amount they were consuming was so crazy that humans, to consume that amount, would be like nonstop drinking Diet Coke.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a reasonable amount, because they want to see the effect right away. Mm-hmm. Funding is limited usually, and they're like, okay, let's see if we can cause cancer if we give them enough of this type of thing. And so that's the problem, is when that becomes the baseline for anything, that's a really easy baseline to disprove, and that's the problem with, like, and you look at like the people who are looking at drugs and stuff too. If hurting someone is the baseline of good or not, and there's no amount limit to that baseline, then you can pretty much make everything harmful to someone.
Yes.
So if perfection is a baseline, really, I mean, water's bad for you if perfection is a baseline.
Yeah.
Because you could drink enough where you can die from it.
Yeah, anything,
so that's the issue that you have with these studies. You got to look at, okay, how is this used in real world application? Is me drinking a Rain Energy every day gonna cause me cancer? Or is it me drinking 1 Diet Coke a day going to cause a cancer too? Or is it like, how many would it take? Mm-hmm. And that's where it becomes, okay, is there any practical like application of this study to real world? And in the ones that I've seen, it's no, because no one would drink that much. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, like your weight and basically pure aspartame. Yeah. Which the pure form of the aspartame is like crazy sweet to begin with, right? Yeah. It's like, whoa, you don't even, because a lot of people think that the blue packets that you see at like Starbucks, like that's more than just aspartame. That's a filler too, but the actual pure form of aspartame, you would just dip your little pinky in, put it on your tongue, and you'd be like, whoa, that's way too sweet, Actually, you know what? That's funny to go into. That's actually a good topic we could go into that part of it too. And then I'll let you go into the rest of it. But that's a really smart thing. So so when you get a sugar packet or a sweetener packet, sweetener packet, I saw you go in there. From like a Starbucks or something like that, it's not just the pink, the blue, the yellow, whatever. It's not just what's in the pink, the blue, or the yellow. Like, it's not just the aspartame, the saccharin. Is it saccharin is the other one? And then saccharin's pink, sucralose is yellow, aspartame is blue.
Look at you. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I didn't know that.
I know my packets.
That's pretty good.
I'm dressed like an aspartame packet today. I did it just for the theme of today.
You know what's funny?
Not really. I just thought of that. But.
So if you're not going to catch this, but Ashley's pants are inside out.
They are. See my like thing here?
Yeah, it is inside out. It's so funny.
I noticed that, like an hour ago, and I'm just like, oh, whatever. I'll just roll with it. Whatever.
You're an inside out aspartame packet today. Yeah. That's great. You gotta get away from me because you're gonna cause me cancer. Oh, so I'm definitely getting enough of you where I'd have cancer if you were aspartame. It's like daily with Ashley.
It wouldn't out me. I'm taking years off your life.
But you're so light, I don't think it would be relative to my weight. So that's great. That's a great simile there, right? So, all right. Now, with the packets themselves. Okay, so when you get a packet of sweetener at Starbucks, whatever, it is, as she was saying, the raw sweeteners are so sweet. They're so sweet that you would use so little of it that the packets would be like, you'd have an empty packet basically.
Yeah, you'd be like, what's in here?
Yeah.
And they'd get lost and probably blown away in the wind.
They probably would, yeah. So, you know what really sucks is that these sweetener packets, instead of being just like aspartame as a little bit of amount or a little pill, and in some countries they're doing little pills now, which is really cool, where it's just the product, like just the aspartame or just the whatever, the stevia, and you just drop it in and it disintegrates. But in right now that hasn't really made it to the U.S. But in the U.S., the sweetener companies, they think we're all stupid, and this is actually the reason. This is crazy. This is actually the reason. They think the consumer wouldn't understand. They didn't say we're stupid. They said they think the consumer wouldn't understand getting a packet that was so close to empty and so far away from sugar that they wouldn't use it. So instead of them giving us packets that are very, very little bit of stevia or very, very little bit of aspartame, they fill it with another filler, which is the filler is usually a sugar type thing. Dextrose, maltodextrin, there's a whole bunch of like fillers, which they take up the same volume of what a sugar packet would look like or feel like, and it's really just a different name for sugar, but it's less sugar in those than it would be in a real sugar. So like a normal aspartame packet, you're gonna get, a couple grams of sugar in that from the dextrose, from the maltodextrin. So you're actually gonna get some sugar, even though you're drinking something that's sugar-free. So if you're doing like 8 packets of aspartame, which I've seen, there's a girl that works out here, I won't tell you who she is, but she'll do 6 packets. I'm like, you're getting like 15 grams of sugar in that, like just in those packets alone. She's like, nuh-uh. I'm like, yeah, it's not sugar-free, those ones. So if you want to get sugar-free, you could get stevia, like buy it in the liquid, which is what you do.
That's still not even the pure form either, because they mix it with alcohol or glycerin.
The droppers?
The droppers, yeah. But you can get pure form powder though.
Powder, yeah. I use the powder packet. I use a dropper sometimes too. You're using very, very little of that, but I use the droppers, or I use the and there is a liquid one. They just have water in it too. I have seen that one.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about the liquid. It's definitely like if they like mix it with alcohol or water, for example, it's not gonna cause you more like, oh, it's sugar, it's a carb, but it's not as sweet as the pure, and it's more expensive. So if you think about it like this, you can buy something on Amazon like the pure form of stevia powder, and you get like a little envelope and you think, oh, that's not a lot. But then you realize, oh, the pure form is like crazy sweet. Yeah. That'll do you for months and months and months. Whereas I find that the droppers, you need a lot of the dropper.
To be honest, I do use a lot more of the dropper when I use it.
So it's more cost effective to buy the pure form powder.
Yeah. I have the powder packet I get from Amazon. It's like, for people who aren't seeing, I guess it's like 6x4 or something. I don't know. It's like they give it to you in grams. I think it's like 200 grams or something. I don't know. But it's like $20, and it seems like a lot for a little. But then I probably use one packet like every like 18 months. Mm-hmm. There's just so much, so little of it.
Sweet,
yeah. So there's like a scale of sweetness, they call it, and like if you ever seen the hot scale where they rate everything based off like a jalapeno as like a baseline, where it's like this pepper is like 200 times the heat of a jalapeno. They have something similar to that with sugar. Like this sweetener is 200 times the sweetness of sugar. And all of the artificial sweeteners are like hundreds of times sweeter than the actual sugar. So anyway, that's just something good to know. Those packets, they're not calorie free, they're not sugar free. And yeah, you're gonna add extra calories to your drink. So
beware of that, guys.
Yeah. So the other one was the other two topics that was
the other point about artificial sweetener, and I've heard this, that your body cannot tell the difference between real sugar and artificial sweetener. Now, I do not know where that one came from. Honestly, that one is very, very false. Your body definitely can. And I'll tell you what, for peace of mind, I used to travel a lot to show. And back in the day, we would kind of like travel all together, right? So I remember specifically, we were traveling from Arnold, Ohio. Then we had a group of athletes travel to Arnold, Australia, and then to the New Zealand Pro Show, like week to week. And the promoter, I guess, kind of booked us all together on the same flights, and we spent a lot of time with each other. The bodybuilders, man, they would be having like 1 week out from a show, like they'd have their 2 liter of Diet Coke, just drinking it. They drink it like it's nothing. And I see it too whenever they're prepping, they're consuming it. So think about like the people that need to pay attention to like sugar and calories even more than bikini or anybody else. They're super particular about that. They're still consuming artificial sweeteners. And I don't think that anybody on the high level will tell you it's just like sugar and your body doesn't know the difference. That is very false.
Yeah.
And diabetics too. If that were the case, then how come diabetics are suggested to consume the sugar-free products and stuff like that? Because of the blood sugar too. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe they're talking about your brain sees it that way or something. And the argument that I've heard as well, I mean, so this is a different argument that I'm bringing up. But the other argument that I've heard is that like, because it tastes so sweet, your brain thinks it's sweet, so it wants more food. And it wants, but it's not getting the sweetness. So I don't know.
That one could be true, but I feel like that's an individual basis thing, right? I think for most things in life, you know, eating a certain food for a long period of time, your body's going to want that. So if your body thinks that it's sugar, then you want more sugar. I think that's more of an individual thing. But I feel like for me, it's the opposite. Like if I want something sweet after a meal, I'll have like a glass of Crystal Light or whatever instead of a cookie, for example, if that makes sense. So I don't feel like for me that's the case, but I could see how somebody could think that way.
I think that the main thing is it's like the groups that you use for those types of studies, you know?
Yeah.
So like if you use, you know, a group of people that are all, you know, 50 plus pounds overweight and they eat a lot of sugar already, and then they all of a sudden their very first time, because they usually drink Coke, they drink a Diet Coke and then their body like feels the sweetness, like, and like the brain thinks it's sweet, but it's not getting the sugar. Then they might crave it more. But I think like I don't crave it more after it. I'm never like, oh, I need something more after I drink a Diet Coke or something like that. So I feel like that's very much a one of those studies you can't really like prove, because the case group itself is already more inclined to having those things, you know, like especially like when you see, like there was another study I saw on the artificial sweetener thing too, was like some people were like that were already close to being diabetic, then they started having artificial sweeteners and they increased their sugar consumption, and then it was more likely they would get it. I'm like, yeah, but the group was already close.
Right.
Like, so they added Diet Coke to their bad habits, and then they still got it over time. That's what happened. It didn't just they just didn't have the discipline to not continue eating the way they were and just added Diet Coke to them basically. So like, so there's like, you got to look at the studies and the groups and who it was and how it actually works. So the problem is someone will see that and they'll be like, oh, it causes diabetes. And I'm like, no, let's look at the whole thing. Like these people were already eating bad. They tried to get them off of it, of the sugars and whatnot, and being overweight. They used Diet Coke as the problem solver. It didn't solve the problem, and the problem continued to exist, and then it eventually progressed. So like, and then people will see it and they'll be like, oh, it causes diabetes. And I'm like,
here, in most cases, there could be like a little bit of truth to an article they read or a narrative that they see being pushed. But if you look at the bigger picture of things, you'll see that there are flaws within that argument that can be debunked easily. And I feel like there was like that big controversy like years and years ago about energy drinks and how like it can cause heart attacks and it's bad for you. And it's like, maybe if you already had that, and maybe somebody did die because of an energy drink, but they also had conditions already that were like, you know, they were at the tipping point anyway, if that makes sense. So I think like with anything, you kind of have to look into the bigger picture and don't just like go off of one article you see online or something that you see your favorite social media personality posted. You know, there's always more to the story. Yeah,
there was one with a popular thermogenic like in 2000s. They're like, some girl who was playing soccer, she died because she was taking some type of ECA stack. Pretty sure I think that Rip Fuel got blamed for it, but back then there was like ephedrine and stuff and whatnot too. And but I was like, well, like, and then it came out, oh, she had like 12 of them, and then she had a pre-existing heart condition. And then I go into it again. I'm like, well, a girl that young, that little, shouldn't have had 12 freaking Rip Fuels, right? And everyone with common sense would know that anyway, right? But and then she had a pre-existing heart condition, so it's all those things. So like again, if the baseline to any drug, any supplement, anything is perfection with zero side effects, no supplements would ever get approved. No drugs would ever get approved, because nothing consumed at a certain amount will not cause a problem. Like, and so that's the problem with like, even with like the drug thing. Cause there's like, I forget, it was on a Joe Rogan podcast. There's a guy talking about the like the positive effects of like certain drugs. And like, they're like, oh, well, you can overdose on it. And then there's a guy like, well, he was saying the same thing. He's like, if the baseline is how much would it take for you to die, then everything is like that, right? So it's like, yeah, so it's like, well, what's the realistic amount someone should take? Well, if that girl took one pill, she'd probably be fine, you know? Like, so that's, I think that's another thing with that, with like the energy drink. So are you drinking a case a day? Then yeah, you're probably gonna have a problem with it. You know, you shouldn't be taking in that much caffeine. So yeah, you know, that's another one of those scenarios.
Totally.
So is that the one? Is that the artificial?
That's another point that you had as well earlier is about the digestion and artificial sweeteners.
So that one. So what they're saying is that the healthy bacteria in your gut can be affected negatively by artificial sweeteners. This one, I just based on working with people who have like IBS and whatnot, I will say that if someone has IBS or serious issues, I will say probably 90% of the time they're affected by artificial sweeteners. Right. You know, I had a girl named Leah. It was like 10 years ago. Gosh, probably even longer. Yeah, it was like 10 years ago. And it's funny is that like I was into like the artificial sweetener thing and all that stuff back then, and like even like knowing, like I would basically cut it for people, but the week of their show, even back then, just because I was like, just in case. It's one of those just in case things. And she was going to all these doctors and all these people for her gut. And then she came in and she had a Starbucks, and she told me she put like six of those packets in her Starbucks. And I was like, how many of those artificial sweeteners do you put in there? She's like, 6. She's like, and I drink like 2 of these a day. I'm like, you're drinking a lot of artificial sweetener. And do you know that like the effects it has on you, on your IBS and whatnot? She's like, no. And I'm like, she's like, but I've seen a ton of specialists. I've seen all this, and they can't figure out my gut. I'm like, how about you just cut your artificial sweeteners for like a week, and let's just see if it makes you any better. And then she like texts me like a week later. She's like, Adam, I'm so mad right now because I've seen all these specialists, all these doctors, they give me all these prescriptions, all these medications. I cut my artificial sweeteners for a week and I feel fine. I've never felt this good in my life.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's crazy. Not one of these specialists told you this. These are like, you know, doctors of like specialized medicine on multi-level tiers of gut health. And no one's told you this. And some knucklehead trainer, you know, working at Club USA just said, hey, try this, and it worked. She's like, yeah, and that's why I'm so pissed, because of the amount of money I've spent on this, and they just keep throwing prescriptions at me and not giving me any solutions, and all it was this. Like, and she just basically is artificial sweetener free now. Yeah. And she's been pretty healthy. I haven't talked to her in you know, quite a few years, but I worked with her for about 2 or 3 years after that, and she was fine after that. Never had any issues, took away her prescriptions. And so she did, you know, she took probiotics, digestive enzymes, and just had no artificial sweeteners, and she was fine after that.
Yeah.
So
I believe that one to be true too for some people.
I think it's for some.
For some, yeah. I mean, like, and also depending on the sweetener as well, because I know some of them, you can even probably tell yourself, like some sweeteners that you consume, you get a little like bloated or gassy or whatever. And I think that is something to do with like your body doesn't digest it, so it just kind of lets it gas up or something. I'm not exactly sure, but I do believe that to be true. So that is, you know, one that, just like you said, just in case, we like to eliminate those like the last week of a show. Will it make a difference? Maybe, maybe not, but hey, just in case, because you never want to look back and be like, well, what if we tried to eliminate sweeteners? Maybe your waistline could have been a little tighter. I hate those what ifs. So just to eliminate that, I'm like, you know what? Let's cut back on those sweeteners this week and, you know, do as much as we can without it. So I think that's very, very accurate.
Yeah, I think there's something to that one. And then like for me personally, like when I do protein bars with a lot of sugar alcohol in it, I'll look like I gained like 5 to 10 pounds. Like it's actually frustrating because I love like One bars and whatnot, but I get so bloated from them, like Quest bars too. And I get so bloated from them though, like my gut is like bigger from it for like a few days, you know? So it's like, it just looks like I gained weight. It's like so uncomfortable looking. It doesn't feel bad. But yeah, so I guess if you pay attention to that, if you're one of those people, but you know, take healthy bacteria, take a good digestive enzyme.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's super healthy. The problem is too, is in Western world period, like in a Western culture, we don't take in very many cultured foods, and that's always the issue. So if you go to places where they're eating a lot of cultured foods, where they're eating like, you know, lots of yogurts and curries and things like that, you don't really run into as many gut problems too. So it's also our diet is just not very healthy bacteria friendly.
Yeah.
You know, and so when you look at like they rarely like if you look at like any cancers that are related to those like to not having healthy guts, if you look at like India in countries where that's more of a normal thing, it's a lot lower rate there too. So so there's something to be said. And I like looking at like the mass studies like that or the mass groups, like looking at like Asian countries and low risk of heart attacks and why is it better there? Is it the fish? Is it the healthy diet? Like it's so you like looking at those things. It's like a pretty large case group, right? That you can look at. And so it looks like in terms of gut health, there's something there. So.
Get your fermented foods in. All right. You know, I wanted to also put in there as well a great, I guess, thing to kind of counteract artificial sweeteners, if you do have a problem with it, is drink more water. Like dilute the sweetener. You know, don't just drink Diet Coke, a gallon a day of Diet Coke. You know, have your few cans of Diet Coke, but drink a gallon of water. You know, I think diluting it will definitely help and help get things out and make it more normal to begin with if you have those issues. But yeah, I think another side, a wacky side of the artificial sweetener argument is like, I don't know if you've ever seen or heard, there is like conspiracy theories around artificial sweeteners with the soft drink company, like out to kill people and eliminate the population. Like it gets crazy.
This population control thing.
It gets crazy. But you know, I think like the average person when they hear artificial sweetener, they get like scared, right? I remember last week I was shopping at the Dollar Tree and they had $1 bangs and I was stocking up. And then when I went to cash out, the cashier was like, "Oh, I've never seen these before. What are these?" I was like, "Oh, it's just like an energy drink." And she's like, "Wait, there's 0 calories. How? How is it 0 calories?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's just, I think it's sweetened with sucralose." And she's like, "What's that?" And it's like, "It's an artificial sweetener." And she's like, "Oh, no. And I'm like, she's being like a concerned mom or something. And I'm like, I didn't get into the whole debate. I was just like, okay. Like, so like the average people get scared of that. And that's like, probably she would look at that, a sugar-free drink or a Diet Coke versus a regular Coke. And I bet you 9 times out of 10, she'll pick that regular Coke. Cause it's like,
because I think it's better for her.
Because she thinks because that one is artificial, it must be worse for you than real sugar versus artificial sugar, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But the problem is, here's the issue that you run into too, and I'll just touch on it briefly because this is a whole nother rabbit hole. But any giant organization is going to make other organizations try to look like not as good and make themselves look better. So unfortunately, the sugar like organizations, the big, if you want to call it big sugar, which is
big sugar,
it's like an actual thing. You know, it's like they have a ton of lobbyists putting pressure to keep sugar at a very high amount in the United States. That is in their benefit to make everything else look bad. So if you can make artificial sweeteners look bad and make your product look better, and you consume more of it, like they got to that girl. And it's an actual real thing. Like you can look up sugar lobbyists. It's crazy. And so like it's a real thing, and it's unfortunate that you can kind of like buy your way in our country into, you know, bills and studies and things like that to put out in the mainstream media, but you can, and that's just the reality of things. That poor girl's watching TV. She doesn't know that she's being fed like little snippets that help the argument of sugar. That she doesn't know they're being helped. But you can look at some of these studies that are like anti-artificial sweeteners that be like funded by whatever sugar. Like it's like it's so sad, but it's a real thing, and I'm not going to jump into that, but that's a real thing, and I feel bad for her. And the only other problem too is that like news will make a lot more money if you're scared. Oh, they don't make money telling you, "Oh, hey, look at this puppy chased a butterfly today." They say, "Oh, the girl drank energy drinks, an artificial sweetener killed her," you know, and it's like, "Oh, stay tuned, we got to see what happened there," and then like, you know, you remember it. So it's like,
unfortunately,
that's the problem. That's the problem with it. So unfortunately, that's a real thing. It's a whole other rabbit hole that I don't want you guys to dive into. I'm so far into those rabbit holes. You don't want to get into it.
I mean, as long as you're aware of it, you know, I think it's good to put it out there, just because sometimes I think we watch the media or read something and without thinking, we automatically believe it. But just think about what Adam just said. Like, there's other companies trying to make the other look bad, just as I'm sure like the artificial sweetener community is trying to make high fructose corn syrup look bad, and so on and so on. So that's why you probably see these conflicting articles, like 1 minute it's good or okay for you, 1 minute it's bad, 1 minute it's okay. And it's probably just them going back and forth with these studies and stuff. It's like a war.
It's a tool. There's a real side to it, and then there's a funded by side to it for a particular reason, right? For a particular benefit. So I remember there was years and years where they were trying to disprove that smoking was bad for you. Like they had a whole team of scientists trying to find anything to prove that it was actually good for you at one point. Like it's so crazy, like the amount that goes into this just to spin a narrative, So yeah, just so be aware of that. Won't jump into that rabbit hole. That's a mess, that one. Right. But yeah, so just look into it yourself. Look at the actual studies. Like look who funded it, and then kind of go from there. Now the other one I think that we do here, I've heard it. I do hear it quite a bit. I'm surprised that you haven't heard it as much. But the microwaving, like killing foods, like killing your nutrients in foods and all that.
I thought that went out like years ago, but I still get it from time to time. I
still hear it, yeah.
It's like, man, what the heck? I get it why people would think, like, because of microwaves, they're waves, radioactive microwaves coming and attacking your food, sucking up all the nutrients and giving you cancer, But, man, microwaves are so common. And from what I understand of it, it does quite the opposite. It preserves in comparison to, like, cooking or frying your food.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Okay, so, again, this is another multi-layered thing where you have to look at in terms of depth of it, right? So, all right, does microwaving food hurt the nutrients in your food? And the short answer would be yes. That's the short answer. Okay, now the next question is, does any cooking of food at all denature things in your food? Does it hurt nutrients in food? And that answer is also yes. Any heating of food, except for particular foods, will make it worse than if you just ate it as is. It'll make the nutrients less. So now you have to look at, okay, what are the degree of which microwaves hurt it versus the baseline, which the baseline could be, cooking it in a pan, right? Which is we're all like, oh, that's good for you, right? So how much worse is it is the real question, right? So because all cooking is eating, the best way to eat broccoli is right out of the ground. Sorry guys, that's just the way it's going to be. Because as it is, it's just better for you. It's 100% of the nutrients, right? Now, any cooking to that is going to be less good for you, right? Less nutrients available. And that's just like biological availability of food. It's called BV.
But the flip side to that would be now you're going to probably experience some digestion issues because people who consume only raw sometimes can't even get enough food in because it's having a hard time breaking it up.
That's the
weird, weigh your options.
Yeah, that's the thing about the extreme community where they're like, oh, you need to get all your nutrients from food and you can't eat it from supplements and this and that. The problem is with that whole side of things, I'm like, do you know how many nutrients, like how much food it would take to get in all your vitamins and minerals from food? It is so much vegetables and fruit. It would be a daily task where you'd be like, okay, let's do this today. Like I could probably do it for a day. And it's so much that it's like a basket of fruit. And then the calories are so high, you probably have all the problems with like the diabetes with at the end of it. So it's so much fruit and so much veggies, like the pure volume of the food and sugar that you're eating is just like, it'd be too much. So yeah, I'd rather get it in a pill. Yeah, stay healthy.
Seems easier.
Calorie-free pill, than doing it with like a basket of fruit. So, okay, so let's look at back to the microwave thing. Okay, so now we know all food is denatured by heat. Okay, so microwaves, is it significantly worse? And it's funny because microwaves are actually better in a lot of scenarios than other cooking methods. So some cooking methods are worse for some foods, and microwaving is worse for some foods. That's just the way it is. But now it's not like, I guess, like hurting your food in a way where it's like causing you cancer and like changing the structure, molecularly of the food, where it's like now it's not broccoli anymore. Now it's like some weird thing that you're eating and eventually is going to cause you cancer, which is what I hear like being the thing. Oh, it changes the food. You're using all this radiation and all these different things. And I'm like, okay, let's look at that. So, all right, so let's look at one example is this that I pulled up was broccoli. Okay, I don't know why I usually use broccoli as a thing. All right, so broccoli has vitamin C in it, right? So boiling broccoli reduced the vitamin C. So boiling broccoli reduced vitamin C by 33% in broccoli versus raw, okay? Steaming it, so here's the thing, vitamin C is water soluble, right? So yeah, using high amounts of water is going to reduce the total availability because it's basically dissolving to some capacity in the actual water, which is crazy. So some foods are way worse for you to have boiled, right? And then if you look at microwaving, only 16% of the vitamin C is destroyed by the microwave, which is pretty cool. But I imagine if you, let's say you microwaved it without anything, or if you put it in a bowl and you put some water in it, I bet you'd lose more, because the water, it's a water soluble vitamin. And so it breaks down in the water a little bit, and that's what happens, right? So steaming it was very little, almost none, which is surprising because there is moisture involved, but it's just a little bit. So that tells you right there, okay, well, microwaving is actually better for you significantly, actually twice as good for you in terms of the vitamin C, microwaving it than boiling, which would be on, like when I first would see that happen, I'd be like, oh, of course boiling it's going to be better for you. Like I would just assume. I'd be like, of course boiling is better for you than microwaving. So there's a lot of foods like that. And there's actually some foods that are better cooked. Like for example, eggs. Eggs, your body digests better when it's cooked than when it's raw. Mm-hmm. So, and you actually have a higher net protein utilization. So basically the amount of protein your body actually can use is higher. Some of the studies have been shown up to 50% more protein is usable and digestible when it's cooked in an egg than when it's raw, which is pretty nuts. That's like the extreme of foods. That one's like the extreme. More foods than not are better raw. Like, if you're looking about like high biological value in the foods, like salmon, sushi is better than salmon cooked for sure. So there you go.
But then some you can't get away with not cooking, right?
Yeah.
Because of safety reasons. Which, funny story, actually, I don't know if you've ever had microwave chicken from raw before, like raw microwave chicken. I remember when I was in Australia and I was really desperate because they didn't have any cooked chicken and the hotel ran out of chicken. So I went to the grocery store and they, over there, they didn't have like pre-cooked chicken like we do. It's not like I could buy a rotisserie chicken or anything. They only had a raw. So I tried to cook it in the microwave.
How does that work?
It's gross.
Does it work?
I mean, technically, but it was very rubbery. Oh. I figured it was better than raw though. So I won't have to do that again.
I wonder what happens with that. I wonder what Ed's doing. That's funny.
It's gross, but yeah, from raw, it's definitely disgusting.
That's pretty gangster, dude. That's a commitment to.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't go over so well. So I mean, that was a one-time only thing.
That's funny.
Oh my goodness. Good times.
That's a funny story though for like competing though. That's a funny competing story.
Yeah, it's definitely a memory that I have for sure.
Hear Amanda Larson's chicken in India story. That one's hilarious. Like her boyfriend was trying to get her chicken, and it was like they're in some weird place in India competing, and the guy. So he went to some place on the street in India, and he was like, "Yeah, I just need chicken. I just need chicken for her, and that's all I want is just chicken." And they only had like chicken, like full chickens there. So he's like, "Well, I just want the breast meat." And so they gave him the breast meat. So some guy was like cutting it and cooking it. And it's just different culture, over there. I don't know if it was this guy or if it was a culture, but he was explaining it to me. And he actually he was trimming the chicken to cook it, but he like used his foot to hold the meat. So he like used his foot as like a brace and then this. So like he had his hand, the chicken. So he had his hand, the chicken, and then the chicken and the foot, and used his other hand to like hold it and use a knife. So he's using he put his foot like up on his little table, like on the side, and then cooked it. And he was like, the guy was like, her boyfriend was looking at it as like, holy crap, I can't tell Amanda that he's this guy just put his foot all over this chicken because she won't eat it and she needs chicken, right? So why is chicken so hard to get? So he cooked up a bunch of chicken, she took it to her, and then after the trip, she actually won her pro card in India, which is really funny. So it's like the funniest story now. And she was telling me the story. And then after he's like, hey babe, I have to tell you something about your chicken. And she's like, I'm eating foot chicken. Like, why did he feed chicken? He's like, well, it was cooked, so it's fine. Everything, if he wouldn't had anything, it was cooked. It's not like, it's so funny. So she'll tell you that story. She's hilarious. So that's a real story. Isn't that so funny?
Wow, that is so different from us.
Yeah.
Seems like a health code violation over here, but wow.
I don't know.
That's crazy.
I don't know. It seems like a useful
I'm glad
tool.
she's still alive.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, there you go. We're this is another example of how we're not like, germs aren't as crazy as we think. And maybe, I mean...
And I will say, people in other countries too, they have, correct me if I'm wrong, but different adaptations to different like parasites and bacteria than us, which is why like my boyfriend Hugo can eat a meatloaf that's been out for like 48 hours.
Me, man. He scares me.
But like, I remember I went over to Brazil and I remember the only time I consumed water was like brushing my teeth, and I didn't even consume it. I just used it to brush my teeth, and I came home with like diarrhea for a month. So, I mean, who knows what it was, but yeah, I think our, adaptations for parasites and bacteria are so different than others.
Yeah, you just need
they
one.
got tough stomachs, so they can handle it.
I used to train a microbiologist, and she's like, you just need one. She's like, you just need one.
One what?
Like bacteria, like one. She's like, you just need one for things to start going bad. You just need one. I was like, she used to be work with the Food and Drug Administration on like when there'd be like spinach recalls and things like that for E. coli or whatever. Like she would always, she was like the main one. And she was my client. Her name was Connie. She was awesome. And she'd always say, you just need one. Like she was always like, she'd always be on me for like, because now it's funny, we've all like gotten more like, I think because of COVID and everything, we've all gotten like cleaner with our hands and whatnot. That was like the one thing I did with COVID. I was like, I didn't never wear a mask. I never had to wear a mask in the gym. I was like, it's up to you. Do what you want. But the one thing I would do is like during it, especially in the beginning, I was like, okay, if I'm eating any hand food, I'll always wash my hands.
Yeah.
And like I'll like wash it more thoroughly now. Like
because they always had those things on the TV, because we all forgot how to wash our hands apparently, but you have to do like 20 seconds here, then go in between and with the thumbs and all that. Like, I never really thought about it before. I'm just like, soap, slap, rinse.
That was actually, I didn't learn how to wash my hands until COVID. Yeah. I was like, oh, I've been doing it wrong my whole life. I didn't know that. It's so fun.
And then your hands get all dry, cracked.
Yeah, I remember when the like getting like hand sanitizer was like gold. Remember you couldn't find it anywhere? It
was so expensive. Now it's like on clearance for like 50 cents for a big old thing.
Yeah, so that's the one thing I did was like my hands, because she would always make fun of me because I'd eat something in front of her, and it would be like after a whole day at the gym, and I'd like do it real quick, like with my hand. She'd be like, Adam, it just takes one. It just takes one. And you never wash your hands in here. And she'd always be looking at me like, it just takes one. So it was actually really funny because I was pretty gross, to be honest, when I was like, 10 years ago, like just like a guy in the gym. I was always just like a gross guy that would like lift weights, eat with his hands. It's just, you think about it now, I was like, you're like, man, how did I survive?
Wow.
This has been rough up in these gyms.
Totally.
So what's another one that you know?
I think that they're due to the influx of people at home over the last year, watching Netflix, and some documentaries came out. Lots of vegan-friendly documentaries. It kind of instilled a fear into people that they should be eating vegan, and that's the way to go, and it's going to cure all of life's diseases and cancers, and you kind of get that idea, right? But sometimes I still, I hear it, right? I hear people being very extreme about, a vegan diet, which, people are vegan for many different reasons, right? And I think it's awesome, and I actually love vegan food, believe it or not. I love tofu, I love veggie grill, I love it. To me, it's really tasty. But then you have people that take it really, really far. For example, I remember when I had my eye surgery, right? So I remember I got this really long, detailed message from a vegan who basically said, the reason why I was having issues with my eyes is because I ate meat. And he really put some time into making this really long, letter to me. And I'm just like, this guy actually thinks that I had strabismus because I ate meat. Like, what? Huh? Like, I don't know. Maybe he's been watching too many documentaries. I'm not sure. But, I mean, clearly being vegan has some health benefits, but it's not going to cure everything for everyone. And I think even a lot of the vegans out there will admit there are some very extreme people, like the guy that wrote me this letter, that kind of might make the rest look bad. And they're not all like that. But, there's extreme people in every group, right? And even in our fitness group, there's very extreme people that just take it too far and it gets a little too wacky, So I think it does have something to do with those documentaries, which might have a little bit of truth to them, but otherwise maybe a little too biased and sponsored by vegan product companies.
That one was sponsored. They found out that it was sponsored by a whole bunch of vegan product companies. Yeah. That's crazy. So, it sucks that that's a thing, and it's getting traction too, which sucks. Yeah. And I'm all for vegans. You're vegan, great.
I love their.
I work with a few vegans.
Mindset, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I did it for a month myself just to try it. That's the problem I had with being a vegan. I did it just for a month to go through it so I can help people prep for it better and understand it. My issue with it was you have so much more volume of food, so much more volume of food versus because getting your protein in 4 ounces of meat to the equivalent of that in beans or something is so much food.
It kind of throws off macros sometimes too. Your carbs are going to be much higher than the average person.
So your ratios change. What I found I had to do was I actually had to decrease my fat in order to get the same calorie marker, because the proteins, a lot of them are 1-to-1 ratios of carbs to protein. The problem with it became when someone was having to go real low carb. It was difficult because everything was attached to a carb, unless it was again a pea protein or something that was gluten based, like seitan, which is a gluten based protein, which is really good tasting, and if it was one of those meats or whatever, whatever those meats are, the incredible, what is it called? Incredible meat or something? I don't know.
I've heard Beyond Meat.
Beyond Meat. Okay, so
I'm sure there's an incredible something.
Those had a lot of fat in it. So then
really tasty,
it was hard to get pure proteins unless it was a pea protein in a powdered form type of thing. So it just became more difficult, and I find that it takes a little bit longer to prep someone who's a vegan because of the difficulties you run into and because the ratios of calories are always a little bit higher. So that's the one thing that's seems to be pretty consistent. There's ways to make up for it, you could do more amino acids and less total protein, things like that. But the one thing I learned from it when doing my vegan diet was that it's really good for just voluminous food. So if someone's really hungry all the time, on a diet, and they're one of the people that really struggling on a diet all the time, giving them one vegan meal early in the day might keep them more full throughout the day. Which is I was that's a good tool. Yeah. I'll keep that tool in my box. And if I can give someone a bunch of greens and beans, and they can be more full throughout the day, and that'll help the rest of their diet throughout the week. So I think that's definitely some positives to it. Yeah. And I think that one of the big ones that people the vegans will talk about is your overall heart health and cholesterol because of it. So that's the thing that people I think need to understand too with cholesterol is that if you consuming cholesterol is not going to raise your cholesterol unless you're consuming crazy amounts. So let's say if you're eating a ton of cholesterol and then you're getting extra cholesterol hormone in your body, then yes, you have higher cholesterol. But if you're eating foods that are less than the amount you produce, that's just going to replace the amount you're producing. So that's what people don't understand. So if let's say you're just to make it simple, if you're producing 100 of your own cholesterol and you're consuming 50, well now you're going to produce 50 more. Mm-hmm. Versus if you consume none, now you're going to produce 100.
Right.
So that's what people don't understand about cholesterol. They're just oh, cholesterol is bad for you. I'm well, cholesterol in excess means excess hormone, which is bad for you at excess hormone. Excess testosterone is bad for you. Excess estrogen is bad for you. Excess anything is bad for you.
Right.
So that's what the whole, you just need to dive into these things and understand them better to really be okay, is it bad for me or is it again, it keeps going back to the again. Is anything and too much bad for you? It always keeps going down to that again.
True.
So that's the thing. If that's the argument, that's not the best. If it's for animals, I'm all for that. I think that I'm a meat eater, and even I have a problem with how they treat animals when it comes to mass food. The mass food, the chickens and how they treat them, the pigs especially and how they treat them. So I get it. The overfishing, all that. So Yeah.
Totally. And I think like, yeah, it can definitely be helpful for some people. It's just that, you kind of hear sometimes that crazy stereotype of vegans, which they, for 99.99% of them, they're not. It's that one little minuscule loud bunch that just thinks like it's going to fix everything in life,
Solve traffic.
My vision issues and any like and hair loss and this and that and anything you can think of. I'm pretty sure someone out there has said, if you're vegan, it'll fix it. Relationship problems, be vegan.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what I mean? But I think it's just that very small amount that kind of like, just like, hey, just chill out,
Yeah.
But and I will say there is an opposite side to this. The anti-vegan people, which is also super annoying. The kind that, well, first off, I really hate the people that like kind of make fun of vegans and stuff, like for the animals, like PETA, what is it? Preparation of eating tasty animals or something. Like, come on, you don't need to go that far. But, some of them are like the very like carnivorous bunch that thinks that soy is going to give them man boobs.
Yeah.
So vegan diets tend to have soy, and they think soy raises estrogen. Estrogen means you're about to wear a bra in 2 months, Adam. You're going to be a 34D in 2 months if you turn vegan.
You got me hooked on the soy. I'm a straight up soy